The Razee Saga. Part 9. Ashes of the Shepherd. The chamber was dim, its vaulted ceiling veiled in shadow, the air thick with silence. Around the great crescent table the Alliance Council sat in mourning. Draped upon the wall behind them, the insignia of the Shepherd hung in black, the emblem of the fallen Warhammer-class vessel that had once stood as Earth's sentinel. No voices rose above the hush of memory, only the distant hum of machinery echoing through the station's bones. One by one the councillors bowed their heads. Words of remembrance had already been spoken. Now came the weight of silence, heavier than the void outside their walls. They all knew what the Shepherd's loss meant. A wound carved into the heart of the Alliance. A reminder of how close the galaxy had come to fracture. Admiral Rivers stood at the center, his uniform pressed but eyes weary from nights without rest. He spoke not as commander but as mourner. The Shepherd had been more than steel and reactor fire. It had been home, shield and symbol. And now it was gone. But in the stillness resolve stirred. Reports had already spread across the fleets. The Razee II, though battered and scarred, had emerged from the crucible hole. Its frame groaned with wounds yet to be mended, but repairs moved swiftly, and within weeks it would sail once more into the stars. It had survived what should have broken it, and in survival, it had become more than a warship. It had become proof that the Alliance would not yield. And beside it, docked in the slipways of Sentinel, the Skuta V took shape anew. Once a ship of burden, now remade in the image of the Warhammer class, it would rise to take the place of the fallen Shepherd. Welders burned through the night, hammers rang against steel, and crews worked as if each spark were a prayer of defiance. Earth would not be left unguarded. A single phrase passed among the councillors, whispered first, then spoken with strength. From the ashes of the Shepherd, the fire still burns. The council rose together, not in triumph but in unity. They mourned, they honored, and then they looked forward. For beyond the veil of grief, the Watchers were stirring once more. The void beyond Earth was not the same as it had been. 3 weeks of silence had stretched like an eternity, yet the Alliance had not been idle. Shipyards burned with light, crews moved as one, and from ruin rose something stronger. The Razee II emerged from its docks first, hull plates newly forged and layered with the latest alloys. Its wounds had been sealed, its power core balanced anew, and the ship carried with it an air of defiance. More than repaired, it had been reborn, fitted with a halo net that shimmered faintly when tested, and shield arrays thicker than anything the Federation had ever fielded. It was not the same ship that limped home from battle. It was sharper, stronger, unyielding. Beside it, the Skuta V drifted into the light, its frame no longer burden-borne but war-forged. The crews called it Sentinel's Guardian, though its name remained unchanged. Like the Razee II, it bore the new halo net, a lattice of defense that glowed faint blue across the darkness, and weapons systems that pulsed with readiness. Where the Shepherd had fallen, the Skuta V now stood ready to take its place, and more. Yet even these two giants were not the full measure of what Rivers had prepared. From the depths of cloak and shadow, one by one the shapes revealed themselves. Not one warship nor two but 12. 12 new Warhammer-class vessels, each forged in silence, each bristling with the sharpest edge of Alliance engineering. Their cannons glowed with untapped fury, their missile bays stretched like fangs in the dark, and their shielding wove together in ways no enemy had yet faced. Built in secrecy, born of desperation and foresight, they had been hidden until the time was right. Now the time had come. Earth would not be left fragile. Earth would be fortress. Rivers had kept the secret even from many within the council. He had known what would be needed, and he had acted before permission could be asked or denied. With Shadow and Sunfire now complete, with the Gemini fleet watching over the world they once fled, Earth's skies brimmed with a strength unseen since the dawn of the war. But the silence would not last. Far across the rift, the Watchers stirred. Their fleets, black and cold, moved through the void like a coming storm. Reports filtered back through scouts and shattered outposts. The next strike was imminent. The Alliance no longer stood as prey. It stood on equal ground, waiting. The storm came without warning. No declaration, no pulse across the void, only the sudden ripple of space as the Watcher's armada tore through the dark. Black-hulled warships unfolded from the rift in brutal silence, their arrival blotting out starlight like a curtain of shadow. Alarms screamed across Earth's orbital grid. Civilian stations dimmed their lights, cloaks engaged, and defense platforms aligned their barrels. The Alliance had waited for this moment, and it had come like a hammer from the abyss. Rivers was already on the command deck of the Razee 2 when the first signatures hit the boards. His voice was steady, but the weight of command pressed heavy on every syllable. The Razee 2 surged forward, its newly forged hull gleaming against the backdrop of the enemy fleet. Beside it, the Skuta V held the line, halo net shimmering like a veil of light as the first barrage tore through the void. Energy lanced across the defense web, scattering into nothing. The shields held. And then the secret moved. From the shadow of Earth's moon, cloaks shimmered and fell away. One by one, 12 Titans stepped into the light, the hidden Warhammer fleet. Engines roared, shields bloomed into radiance, and the silence of secrecy was broken by the thunder of activation. The Watchers faltered for a heartbeat, their formations shifting at the sight of Earth's unexpected strength. Then as one they unleashed fury. Dark matter beams cut across the void, slamming into halo nets that rippled but did not yield. Missiles screamed into the night, intercepted by the storm of counterfire. Earth's orbit blazed with fire and light as war came crashing down in full. The Shadow and Sunfire streaked into the fray, their frames sharp and agile, weapons carving through the flanks of the Watcher lines. The Gemini fleet fell into formation with precision, every vessel moving as if bound by a single thought. The Razee 2 bore the brunt of the assault, shields flaring against the endless storm, but this time it did not falter. The Skuta V's guns roared beside it, and the 12 hidden warhammers thundered forward, a wall of defiance no darkness could break. For the first time in the war, the Watchers found resistance they could not crush at will. For the first time, Earth stood unbroken. And in the shadows of their formation, deeper still in the rift, something stirred. Something larger, something the Watchers had not yet revealed. The battle had only begun. The void burned with fire. The 12 warhammers advanced in a line, their cannons erupting in a storm of plasma and kinetic fury. Whole Watcher frigates cracked under the bombardment, hulls splitting like glass under pressure, their shadows breaking apart against the brilliance of Alliance firepower. For every enemy ship that faltered, another emerged from the rift, black wings spreading wider across the stars. The Shadow and Sunfire carved arcs through the formation, their drives bending light as they cut past enemy shields and unleashed blistering salvos. Twin blades of the same forge, they fought in perfect harmony, weaving destruction through the Watcher lines. Crews shouted across channels, their voices steady though the void outside roared. The Razee 2 held the center. Its halo net flared as lance after lance of dark matter struck it, energy washing over the defense lattice in cascades of blue fire. The deck shuddered beneath Rivers' boots, but his voice did not falter. Orders cut like steel, and the crew answered as one. Beside it, the Skuta V thundered, weapons blazing, its newly forged frame unbending against the storm. It bore the name of a ship once unremarkable, but now it fought like a guardian born from flame. For a moment, it seemed Earth might endure the onslaught. For a moment, the Alliance stood taller than the darkness. Then the rift tore wider. From the black came a shape vast enough to dwarf even the Razee 2. Shield layers folded over its surface like rippling waves of iron. Weapons jutted from its spine, glowing with a resonance none had seen before. It was no fleet, no armada of shadows. It was one ship, and it was a Leviathan. The Watchers' answer to Earth's hidden warhammers. The behemoth's opening salvo cut through the void like the strike of a god. A single blast from its forward cannon ripped through space, slamming into one of the hidden warhammers and shearing its shields apart in a burst of molten wreckage. The vessel tore open, scattering fire and bodies across the void. In an instant, the dozen became 11. Shock rippled through the fleet, but Rivers' voice cut it down before it could root. The Razee 2 surged forward, returning fire with every gun that could bear. The Skuta V matched its fury, as did the Shadow and Sunfire, streaking like blades toward the giant. The 11 warhammers followed, unleashing everything they had. The Leviathan staggered, shields flaring bright against the storm of Alliance fire. For the first time, it was forced to yield ground, sliding back beneath the weight of united defiance. But even wounded, it struck again, cutting swaths through the Gemini fleet, scattering ships like dust. Earth's skies became a crucible of fire. The battle raged hour upon hour, neither side relenting. Every halo net rippled to its limit, every gun ran hot, and every crew fought until their hands bled against the steel of their stations. The Leviathan loomed unbroken, even as its shields dimmed under the pounding storm. And then the 12 became 10. Another warhammer fell, torn apart by a beam that split it clean in two. But Earth did not break. The Alliance pressed harder, a wall of fire meeting the shadow. The Razee 2 bore the scars of battle once more, its hull pocked and scorched, but it refused to fall. The Skuda V drove its cannons deep into the enemy's shield. The Shadow and Sunfire circled the Leviathan like wolves, biting deep into its armor with each pass. And then the opening came. A surge of fire from the 10 warhammers struck in unison, timed with a volley from the Razee 2 and Skuda V. The Leviathan's shield cracked, light shattering outward like glass breaking across the stars. Rivers gave the order and every weapon in range answered. The Leviathan screamed with light and fire as its core ruptured. The shockwave tore through the void, scattering debris across the battlefield, ripping lesser Watcher ships into fragments. Silence followed. The Watcher fleet did not retreat, but it faltered. The Leviathan was gone. Earth still stood. On the command deck of the Razee 2, Rivers closed his eyes for a single breath. They had paid a price in blood and steel, but they had endured. For the first time in the long war, they had not only survived the storm, they had broken it. And across the darkness, even as the remnants of the Watcher fleet pulled back into the rift, a single truth spread across the Alliance like fire through dry grass. From the ashes of the shepherd, the flame had risen again. The rift sealed behind the retreating Watcher fleet, leaving only wreckage, fire, and silence in its wake. The void above Earth still shimmered with the fading echo of the Leviathan's destruction. Broken hulls drifted in orbit, some Alliance, some Watcher, all silent reminders of what the galaxy had endured in a single day. Across the decks of the Razee 2, the Skuda V, the Shadow, Sunfire, and the surviving warhammers, crews moved with quiet exhaustion. Repairs had already begun, even as the taste of battle still lingered in the air. The Alliance had not only endured, they had prevailed. But victory had come at a cost. 2 of the hidden warhammers were gone, their names already whispered in mourning across the fleet. Thousands of lives had been extinguished in the blaze of the Leviathan's cannons. And yet, for the first time in the long shadow of war, Earth still stood unbroken when the storm passed. Within the Alliance Council chamber, the air was different now. Grief lingered, yes, but beneath it, a current of strength surged. Where there had once been silence, voices now rose with conviction. Admiral Rivers stood at the center once more, his face lined by exhaustion but lifted by something greater. He looked upon the counselors, leaders of worlds and fleets, men and women who had felt the weight of despair for too long, and he gave them what they needed most. We can fight them. We can stand. We are no longer prey. His words carried through the chamber, echoed by the murmurs of agreement that spread like fire catching dry tinder. Counselors who had once argued over resource allotments now spoke of unity. Those who had doubted now nodded with fierce resolve. The declaration was made, not in whispered promise but in binding decree. The Alliance now fought on equal ground. The galaxy would hear of it. The people would believe it. The Watchers would know it. The Razee 2 and the Skuda V became more than ships. They became living proof of survival, standing tall beside the Shadow, Sunfire, and the 10 remaining warhammers. Earth's sky was no longer fragile. It was fortress. Across the fleets, across the colonies, across the shield world itself, the words carried outward like a clarion call. The war had changed. And yet, in the silence beyond the rift, the Watchers did not sleep. They had lost a Leviathan, but their eyes had not closed. Even now, deep in the black, something else was stirring. In the weeks that followed the battle, Earth's orbit became a forge. The scars of war still lingered in drifting wreckage, but the silence of loss had been replaced by the clang of tools, the hum of engines, and the steady pulse of rebirth. The Razee 2, though battered once more, stood proudly in its berth. Its new shields had held against the storm, its halo net had weathered what would have torn any vessel apart. Now its frame was patched and reinforced, layer upon layer of alloy plating wrapped like armor over scar tissue. Crews moved through its decks with fresh pride, calling it the ship that could not be broken. The Skuda V carried itself with equal weight, its name spreading across the fleets like a banner of resilience. The once ordinary vessel had risen from anonymity to legend. Dockyards swarmed around it, grafting on new layers of shielding, installing the latest pulse cannons, and preparing its launch bays for squadrons yet to come. The 10 warhammers, still bristling with fresh wounds from their first baptism of fire, lined the orbit like a wall of steel. Some bore scars carved deep into their hulls. Others carried names yet unspoken by the crews that now filled them. But each one was alive, tempered by battle, their commanders hardened by the knowledge of what had been lost and what had been achieved. On Sentinel, work did not cease. The Shield World's factories pushed past exhaustion, their forges burning ceaselessly. New cruisers, destroyers, and escorts rolled out in steady rhythm, filling the void left by losses and extending the reach of the Alliance fleet. Supplies streamed through jump lanes, their cargoes filled with ammunition, raw ore, and medical stock. Every world under Alliance command contributed what they could, for they had seen the truth. Unity was survival. Inside the council chamber, plans unfurled. Defense grids were mapped across the Sol system, hidden bases seated on the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, and relay stations established in the Kuiper Belt. No longer would Earth stand as a lone beacon. It would be the heart of a network too dense for shadows to pierce without a fight. Rivers moved between war rooms and command decks, his presence a steadying hand. His eyes betrayed the sleepless nights, but his voice remained iron. He carried with him the weight of the shepherd's ashes and the fire that had risen in its place. Every order he gave, every plan he endorsed, carried the same unspoken vow: Earth would not fall again. Still, even in preparation, unease lingered. Reports from distant sectors told of Watcher incursions against outer colonies, strikes that came fast and vanished faster, as if testing the Alliance's reach. Scout ships whispered of strange movements beyond the rift, signals too faint to identify but too deliberate to dismiss. The Alliance had found equal footing, but the war was not over. The Watchers had retreated, not broken. And all knew, deep in their bones, that the storm would come again. For now, though, Earth stood ready. It began as whispers on the comms, fragments of distress calls from outlying colonies. Then the whispers became screams. The Watchers had returned. They struck not at Earth, but at the outposts stretched along the trade lanes and mining stations beyond the Kuiper Belt. In a single night, 5 colonies went dark. By the time fleets scrambled to respond, the Watchers had already vanished back into the rift, leaving only drifting wreckage and hollow silence behind. It was a pattern, deliberate and cruel. Not full invasions, but scalpel strikes meant to bleed the Alliance dry, to force its fleets to scatter. Rivers recognized the tactic immediately. This was not the storm that sought to overwhelm. This was the knife in the dark, meant to unbalance the enemy before the killing blow. The council raged at the reports, voices raised in fury and fear, but Rivers silenced them with a single statement. They will come here again. Do not scatter. Hold the line. And he was right. When the rift tore open once more, it was not at the edges of the system. It was in orbit of Earth itself. The Watchers came in force. Not just a fleet, but a formation greater than the one that had carried the Leviathan. Countless black warships poured into the void, wings stretched wide, their weapons already burning with fury. Their silence was gone. This was not a probe. This was annihilation. The 10 warhammers moved first, their formation locking tight, halo nets flaring as they braced for the storm. The Razee 2 and Skuda V surged forward to anchor the line, the Shadow and Sunfire cutting across the flanks, and the Gemini fleet shadowing them with precision. The battle lit the sky in moments. Fire and fury lanced across the void, halo nets blazing against endless beams of dark energy. Watcher ships fell in burning fragments, but the Alliance line shuddered under the relentless storm. And then the heart of the retaliation revealed itself. From the rift emerged a Unity-class construct, the Watcher's twisted answer to the Warhammer line. Vast, multi-limbed, its shields layered in fractal webs, its weapons firing in arcs that no defense could block. It was not one ship but many bound together, its form shifting and reforming as it advanced. The Alliance unleashed everything. 10 warhammers concentrated fire in perfect unison, the Razee 2 and Skuda V pouring cannonades into its shields, the Shadow and Sunfire carving strikes into its flanks. The construct trembled under the storm, but its retaliation was brutal. One warhammer shattered in a single stroke, its halo net ripped apart by a lance of black fire. Another was crippled, its engines torn away, drifting powerless as enemy frigates swarmed its carcass. The construct pressed forward step by step, each movement driving the Alliance closer to the breaking point. Rivers clenched his fists as another warhammer died in fire. The council chamber watching from Sentinel went silent as losses mounted. This was the Watcher's trap, to reveal the Unity ship, to bleed the Alliance's hidden strength dry. And then when the first construct fell, destroyed at terrible cost, the true surprise came. The rift tore open again. One Unity class became 2, then 3, then 5. 24 more constructs poured into the void, their forms glimmering with the same fractal shields, their weapons burning with alien fury. The Council's hope faltered. Commanders gasped. For a moment, even Rivers himself stood frozen. The Alliance had revealed its hidden hand. Now the Watchers had revealed theirs. The greatest battle yet had only just begun. The rift burned white with the arrival of the 24 Unity constructs. Their massive forms blotted out the stars, shields rippling like living fire, their weapons burning brighter than suns. For every ship the Alliance had forged, the Watchers had forged something darker, more terrible. The Alliance line wavered but did not break. The Razee 2 surged forward, its hull already scarred but its halo net blazing with defiance. Beside it, the Skuta V thundered, its cannons firing in endless rhythm. The shadow and sunfire wove through the formation, their drives twisting light as they slashed deep into the flanks of the enemy. The remaining warhammers formed a wall, their gunners firing until their arms shook, their commanders calling targets through voices rough from battle. The first wave of Unity constructs struck like tidal waves. Their combined fire slammed into the warhammers' nets, ripping shields apart, driving holes through armor. One fell in the opening minutes, torn in two under the converging beams of 3 Unity vessels. Its death lit the void in silence, only the scream of comms marking its final stand. The constructs pressed forward, their forms shifting, limbs unfurling into new weapons, armor plates folding like living creatures adapting mid-battle. Every strike that landed against them seemed to vanish into fractal defenses, shields that splintered incoming fire into harmless streams. Still the Alliance answered. The Razee 2 and Skuta V locked fire on a single Unity ship, their barges joined by 2 warhammers and the Gemini fleet's precision strikes. The construct staggered, its shields fracturing under the combined assault. The shadow darted past, its cannons ripping through exposed hull. The sunfire followed, its missiles detonating deep inside the breach. For a moment, the construct convulsed, its form unraveling in arcs of black fire before it finally tore apart. Cheers rang across the comms, but they died as quickly as they came. For every Unity construct that fell, another pressed forward. The Alliance was bleeding. 2 more warhammers were lost, one swallowed by a beam that ripped its core apart, another overrun by swarms of Watcher frigates pouring from hidden bays within the constructs themselves. The Gemini fleet scattered to cover the gaps, their smaller vessels fighting with desperate precision, but the line was bending under the storm. Rivers stood on the Razee 2's command deck, hands gripping the rail as the void outside burned. Every loss carved deeper into him, every silence on the comm another name he would carry. Yet his voice did not falter. Hold the line. We cannot yield here. The Skuta V roared beside him, its new shields shimmering under the impact of 3 Unity constructs at once. Sparks rained across its hull, but its guns did not cease. The shadow and sunfire bled trails of light across the battlefield, twin wolves tearing at the heels of giants. And then a turning point. The 10 remaining warhammers, battered and bloodied, formed a wedge and drove straight into the heart of the Unity line. Their halo nets flared as one, linked through a resonance never before attempted. Energy surged between them, their defenses weaving into a single vast shield that cut a swath through the enemy. Their cannons fired in perfect unison, tearing into 3 constructs at once. The Leviathan had taken 1 warhammer to die, but the Unity constructs were falling under the weight of many. The void lit with destruction as another construct fell, then another, each torn apart by relentless fire. The Alliance had paid for every inch in blood and steel, but they were forcing the Watchers back. And yet the cost was merciless. When the guns fell silent, only 6 warhammers remained. The Gemini fleet had lost a third of its number. The Skuta V was bleeding fire from its flanks, and the Razee 2's decks groaned under the weight of its wounds. The Shadow and Sunfire bore scars, their sleek hulls scorched black, but they still lived. The 24 constructs had been shattered. Not all destroyed but broken, retreating back into the rift with wounds that even the Watchers could not ignore. The Alliance had stood its ground. But the price was written across the stars in wreckage and silence. And as the last Watcher vessels vanished into the void, Rivers knew this was not the end. The Watchers had shown only one of their hands. Whatever lay deeper in the rift was waiting still. The battlefield was quiet now, though silence was no peace. Broken hulls drifted in Earth's orbit, silent tombs for the crews that had fought to the last breath. Wreckage smoldered against the black halo nets burned to ash, and fire still glowed from wounds carved into steel. The council's chamber was filled with weary voices and bloodshot eyes. Some spoke of victory, others of cost, but all knew the truth. The Alliance had survived by a margin thinner than breath. They had beaten back the Unity constructs, but the Watchers had not shown their full hand. No one believed they had. Admiral Rivers stood in the center of the chamber, the weight of command etched deep into his features. He carried the memory of each Warhammer lost, each name silenced in the void. Yet his voice carried iron when he spoke. More must be built. Not one, not two, but fleets. Dozens of Unity-class vessels, ours, forged by our own hands. If the Watchers can bring forth such monsters, then we will answer in kind. The words carried like thunder. The council did not argue. They had seen the truth in fire. They had seen how close the edge lay. Orders spread from Sentinel like a pulse through the stars. The Shield World's forges roared louder, their fires never dimming as blueprints for Alliance Unity ships were stamped, coded, and sealed into production. The mandate was simple: construct until the void itself could not swallow what stood before it. 5 new Warhammer-class vessels rolled from Sentinel's bays in the weeks that followed, gleaming giants born in defiance. Their hulls bore the scars of their predecessors, etched deliberately into the steel as remembrance. They joined the line beside the survivors, and their crews spoke their oaths with voices that would not tremble. Across the Alliance worlds, the response echoed. Shipyards awoke on Mars, Luna, and Titan, their slipways crowded with destroyers, cruisers, and frigates. Outer colonies turned their industry from trade to war, their factories hammering out weapons, shield emitters, and the raw ore needed to keep the fleets alive. Civilians carried supplies into the yards, miners volunteered to cut the veins deeper, and every able-bodied hand turned toward one cause: survival. Earth's skies filled with firelight as ship after ship was born, weapons aligned outward, waiting for the storm to come again. And yet, in the quiet of his command quarters aboard the Razee 2, Rivers allowed himself one moment of stillness. His gaze lingered on the stars beyond the viewport, his reflection lined and tired. He had given the order to forge fleets of Unity ships. He had overseen the rebirth of the Warhammers. He had seen the Alliance rise from ashes again and again. And still a whisper gnawed at him. Would it be enough? The Watchers had shown a fragment of their strength, and already the cost had been staggering. Somewhere in the abyss beyond the rift, darker shapes stirred. Something greater waited. Rivers clenched his fists behind his back. The Alliance would be ready. It had to be. The void did not remain silent for long. Scouts brought back fractured reports, whispers of Watcher fleets regrouping deeper in the rift, fragments of transmissions intercepted but not understood. The shape of the enemy was shifting. Where once they had come as overwhelming storm or cutting blade, now they were adapting again. The council knew it. Rivers knew it. And preparation was all that kept dread from taking root. When the Watchers came again, the Alliance was ready. The rift tore open with fury, disgorging not a single Leviathan, not constructs of Unity alone, but something different. Sleeker than the constructs, their hulls shimmered as if light itself bent around them, their weapons thrumming with resonance unfamiliar to any sensor. These were not shadows reborn. They were something new, something more refined, more dangerous. The first volleys from the Alliance ships seemed to vanish against their surfaces, as though the very fabric of the void bent to protect them. But Earth did not stand defenseless. 6 Titans emerged from Sentinel's docks, their frames massive and layered with technology fresh from the Shield World's deepest vaults. They were the Aegis-class fleet, vessels designed not merely to endure but to unify. When they came together, their shields resonated into a single lattice, a dome of protection strong enough to turn even the Watcher's most devastating beams aside. The battlefield blazed as the Aegis line activated, their unified shields stretching across the Alliance formation. Energy struck, rippled, and died. For the first time, the Alliance stood beneath a wall that even the Watchers could not pierce. And then the offense began. The Razee 2 and Skuda V surged forward, their cannons finding purchase where others had failed. The Shadow and Sunfire tore through the flanks, slicing enemy vessels apart before their strange shields could reset. Warhammers bellowed fire across the void, their numbers now reinforced by the newly forged. But it was not ships alone that carried the battle. General Tudor led the Marine strike force aboard the enemy. Drop pods slammed into the hulls of the nearest Watcher vessels, cutting through the armor with plasma charges. Marines poured into corridors filled with alien shadow and steel, rifles blazing, blades cutting, fire burning. They did not simply kill, they captured. Within the heart of Watcher vessels, the Marines fought room by room, tearing out nodes of alien tech, planting charges, seizing control systems. For the first time in the war, human boots ground upon Watcher decks and lived to tell of it. When the charges detonated, Watcher ships cracked from within, their destruction ringing louder than any cannon's roar. The technology they carried back was priceless. Weapons cores that bent energy in ways no Alliance engineer had ever seen, shield matrices that folded across dimensions, and fragments of drive systems that seemed to slip half a second out of phase. Sentinels' forges roared anew. Engineers bent over the alien finds with feverish purpose, tearing apart what they did not understand, learning with each fragment, designing with each breakthrough. The order was clear: build better, build stronger, build now. And then the galaxy shifted again. From the Illyrian system came a revelation. A vessel unlike any the Alliance had seen. Sleek, curved, its frame pulsing with crystalline light, the Illyrian warship emerged from its cradle. Its drives shimmered not in speed but in resonance with space itself. When the Watchers fired upon it, the shots passed harmlessly through empty void. The ship had phased out of reality for a heartbeat, only to return an instant later, weapons blazing. The first test of the Illyrian vessel shook even the Watchers. Their beams missed, their lances cut nothing but light, while the Illyrian warship struck like a phantom. The Council's chamber filled with murmurs when news spread. The Alliance was no longer catching up. It was innovating, adapting, evolving. And still, in the black of the rift, the Watchers stirred. This battle had been only the edge of their new design, a taste of technology not yet fully unleashed. The war was entering a new phase, one where survival alone was not enough, one where innovation itself was the battlefield. The battlefield raged in layers, gunfire flashing across the void, shields flaring against beams that could split moons, and within the hulls of Watcher ships, the guttural sound of men and women fighting in corridors never meant for human feet. General Tudor led the spearhead. His pod struck a Watcher vessel like a meteor, hull plates groaning as plasma drills chewed through armor. When the breach opened, Marines poured in with rifles raised and visors flaring with tactical overlays. The air was thick, heavy with the stench of alien machinery and the static crackle of energy pulsing through black corridors. Shadows moved to meet them. The Watchers' soldiers, things half flesh, half steel, their forms shifting with the same fractal resonance as their ships, surged forward with blades that hissed through air. The first clash was brutal, blades against rifles, Marines firing point-blank into the dark. Tudor's voice thundered through the comms. Clear the nodes. Cut their hearts out. The Marines pressed room by room, laying charges on power conduits, tearing crystalline cores from their sockets. Alien weapons fired arcs of light that melted steel in seconds, but the Marines fought with ferocity born from generations of war. A single Watcher ship became a slaughterhouse, its decks echoing with the fury of men who refused to yield. On another vessel, Sergeant Valen's squad seized control of a command chamber. The alien interfaces shimmered, unreadable, until Illyrian techs linked their implants into the ship's systems. For a brief moment, a Watcher vessel obeyed human hands. Its weapons turned inward, shredding its own escort before collapsing in fire. Above them, the battle outside surged. The 6 Aegis-class ships drew close, their shields unifying into a shimmering dome that enveloped the Alliance core. Dark beams struck with titanic force, But the lattice held, energy dispersing across the network of shields in ripples of blue light. The warhammers fired through the gaps, their cannons hammering Unity constructs with relentless fury. And then the Illyrian warship moved. It vanished, phasing out of existence with a ripple that bent starlight like water. The next instant, it reappeared inside the flank of a Watcher formation, its cannons igniting with crystalline fire. Entire squadrons of enemy frigates detonated before they realized they had been struck. The Illyrian vessel phased again, slipping past a Unity construct's return fire as though it were nothing but shadow. To the Alliance it was a ghost blade, a weapon that struck and could not be struck in return. The Watchers faltered. Their precision once absolute was shaken. On the Razee Saga bridge, Rivers watched it unfold. The Marines boarding and breaking the enemy from within, the Aegis fleet standing unyielding against the storm, the Illyrians unveiling a weapon that defied physics itself. For the first time he saw not just survival but dominance. The Alliance was not merely holding the line. It was pushing forward. And yet the Watchers did not retreat easily. A Unity construct slammed against the Aegis shield, its weapons raking across the lattice until entire arcs of energy failed. One Aegis ship buckled, its systems overloading under the strain. The Marines detonated charges aboard another Watcher vessel, the explosion rippling outward and buying precious seconds for the shield to reset. Hours passed like lifetimes. Each ship fought until its decks bled sparks, until its guns overheated, until its crew could not stand. The void was fire, ash, and endless thunder. And then it was over. The surviving Watchers withdrew into the rift, their new weapons untested but blooded, their losses marked but not crippling. They would return. They always did. But the Alliance had endured. In the council chamber, the air was heavy with exhaustion but not despair. Reports filled the air. 6 Watcher vessels captured intact, dozens destroyed, Marines alive with stolen technology in their packs. The Illyrian warship had survived its first trial, and its phased drives were now the focus of Sentinel's engineers. Rivers stood silent as others spoke, his hands clasped behind his back. He saw the victory for what it was, proof that the Alliance could not only resist but strike back. Yet he also saw the truth behind it. Every victory came at cost. Every breakthrough brought a deadlier counter from the Watchers. The Council agreed to accelerate production. Sentinel's orders doubled overnight, forges roaring with renewed fire. 5 more warhammers rolled out within the month. The Aegis fleet was to be expanded. And in the depths of the shield world, engineers whispered of blending Illyrian phase technology with human steel. Still, as the voices rose in hope, Rivers' gaze lingered on the dark void beyond the viewport. The Watchers had shown them new weapons, but never all at once. He knew what it meant. They were only testing. And the true storm had not yet come. Sentinel burned like a star. Its forges blazed without rest, the echo of hammers and welders reverberating across the hollow world. Engineers and scientists bent over alien fragments brought back by General Tudor's Marines, their eyes hollow with sleepless determination. Watcher cores pulsed with energies that bent reality. Shield matrices folded like origami across dimensions, refusing to behave by known physics. Illyrian phase drives shimmered with crystalline resonance, flickering in and out of visibility even as the labs studied them. At first nothing made sense. Then slowly it began to. The Aegis-class ships were modified, their shield lattices tuned with fragments of Watcher resonance technology. What had once been a dome of light became something sharper, leaner, bending enemy fire away rather than absorbing it. Warhammer cannons were refitted with phase-inverted plasma cores, piercing shields they could not have touched before. And in the deepest chambers of Sentinel, the Illyrians and human engineers worked side by side on something new, the first prototype of a hybrid warship. Human steel wrapped around Illyrian crystal, powered by Watcher cores ripped from enemy decks. A vessel meant to phase between realities, fire like a warhammer, and shield like an Aegis. It was dangerous. It was unstable. And it was the future. Across the Alliance worlds, the ripples spread. Colonies sent or factories turned from commerce to arms, and people stood in lines to enlist. Every planet knew what was at stake now. The Watchers would come again, and if the Alliance was not ready, there would be nothing left to defend. Admiral Rivers walked the docks where the new ships took shape, their hulls gleaming with promise. He touched steel still warm from the forge and prayed silently that it would be enough. He had ordered fleets of Unity ships, dozens more warhammers and expansions of the Aegis line. He had set Sentinel to tasks it had never attempted. And yet, in the quiet of his own thoughts, the question remained: would anything ever be enough? Far across the rift, in the silence beyond known space, the Watchers convened. They did not sit in councils of wood and steel, nor speak with voices shaped by breath. They communed in pulses of thought and resonance, minds folding over one another in patterns no human could comprehend. They had watched their constructs fall. They had felt the loss of the Leviathan. They had seen their prey grow teeth sharper than expected. And they adapted. The new ships sent into battle had only been fragments of design, the first trials of technology meant for something greater. Their phase-bending hulls had not been perfected, their resonance shields not yet tuned to their fullest. The losses were not failure. They were data. In the heart of their dark domain, Titans stirred, vessels larger than the Leviathan, shaped by resonance itself, their cores blazing with energies that split time as easily as light. Around them, forges wove fleets of smaller phasing craft, their forms shifting in and out of existence, meant to strike where no shield could cover. The Watchers saw the Alliance's growth, and they did not fear it. They welcomed it, for only through fire could prey be made worthy. They would come again, stronger, hungrier, endless. Deep within the rift, where light itself faltered, the Watchers' true forges burned. Vast constructs of black crystal and living steel stretched across voids larger than planets, humming with resonance that bent time and space. Here the Leviathan had been born. Here the Unity constructs had been shaped. And here something greater still was stirring. The Watchers did not build ships as humans did. They wove them, folding alloys through resonance fields until the vessels grew like living creatures, their hulls alive with pulsing light. The newest designs shimmered in and out of reality, their cores resonating with energies stolen from beyond the veil of dimensions. When they fired, their weapons did not simply cut steel, they unraveled matter itself. Their greatest project loomed at the center of the forge, a warship so vast that even Leviathans would have appeared like escorts beside it. Its shape was incomplete, a skeletal frame lit by rivers of black fire, but already its presence warped the void. It was not meant merely to destroy, it was meant to unmake. And around it, hundreds of smaller craft phased in and out of existence, their hulls flickering like ghosts, testing strikes against one another. These would be the knives of the next war, ships that could slip through shields, pass through walls of steel, and emerge in the heart of the enemy before striking. The Watchers communed, their voices not words but chords of thought. They did not rage at their losses. They did not mourn the fallen. They only adapted. Prey had teeth now. Prey had claws. That was as it should be. For the greater the prey, the greater the harvest. And when their great vessel awoke, there would be no fortress strong enough to stand. Back on Sentinel, the Forge world burned with equal fervor. Where the Watchers wove their horrors, humans and Illyrians hammered steel and crystal into something that might stand against them. The hybrid warship, the first of its kind, rose slowly within the slipways, a marriage of three technologies never meant to coexist. Engineers argued over every joint, every core, every system. Some swore it was madness, others swore it was the only hope. The Marines trained ceaselessly in the dark decks of captured Watcher hulls, learning to fight in shifting corridors that bent physics itself. General Tudor drove them harder than ever before, for he knew the next boarding actions would not be against ships as they had known them, but against phasing fortresses built to break them from within. And in the council chamber, Rivers stood with the Illyrian envoy. Together they spoke of trust, of unity, of the thin line that now stood between survival and oblivion. The Illyrians promised more of their phase ships would come. The humans promised fleets of warhammers and Aegis shields would stand ready. But Rivers knew, as all of them did, that the war had changed again. The Watchers were not merely an enemy. They were a mirror, adapting, evolving, matching every strike with something greater. The Alliance had risen from the ashes of the Shepherd. Now it would be tested against the fire of something darker. And the storm was already moving. Rivers stood on the command deck of the Razee 2, overlooking the silent expanse of Earth's orbit. Wreckage still drifted there, scars of the last great battle. but the void now bristled with shipyards, refit bays, and new vessels gleaming with promise. He had lived long enough with uncertainty to know the calm was only a reprieve, but for the first time in months, he felt the faint stir of hope. The comms officer turned toward him, eyes wide. Message incoming from Sentinel Admiral. High priority. Rivers motioned for the feed. A moment later, the face of Sentinel's overseer filled the holoframe, his voice steady but carrying the weight of pride. 3 full sets of Unity-class vessels have been completed. All are ready to deploy at your command. The chamber hushed. Officers leaned forward, listening with wide eyes. The overseer continued. And that is not all. The 4 remaining walking bastions have been completely remodeled. They now carry Watcher resonance shields, overlaid with Aegis latticework and reinforced with Illyrian crystal cores. Their firepower has been upgraded with face-piercing cannons, capable of striking through darkness itself and hitting Watcher ships even in shadow form. River's chest tightened. The bastions had been formidable even in their older forms, titans of steel that carried fleets into battle. Now, with alien shielding layered into their bones and weapons that could strike the untouchable, they were something more. They were juggernauts. And one last development, the overseer added, his voice lowering slightly as though savoring the reveal. Our engineers uncovered equipment aboard captured Watcher vessels, particle transporter technology. The Illyrians cracked its function. Your Marines will no longer require pods. They can be transported directly from ship to ship, from deck to deck, materializing in the heart of enemy hulls without warning. River's eyes narrowed, and for the first time in weeks, a sharp smile touched his lips. Surprise. A weapon the Watchers would not anticipate. General Tudor stepped forward from the shadows of the command deck, his armor still marked with the scars of the last boarding action. You give me that tech, Admiral, and I'll put Marines in the heart of every Watcher vessel that dares breach our line. Rivers nodded. You'll have it. And when the time comes, you'll make them bleed for every star they've taken from us. The overseer gave a final bow before the feed cut. The deck was silent again, but it was no longer the silence of despair. It was the silence before a storm. The Alliance now had 3 Unity fleets, 4 bastions reforged into juggernauts, and Marines armed with the ability to appear anywhere at any time within enemy hulls. Rivers looked out into the dark, toward the rift where the Watchers stirred. He had seen their forges in fire and shadow. He knew the storm that was coming would be greater than anything yet faced. But this time Earth was not just waiting. It was ready. It began without warning, a ripple in the void, subtle at first, then swelling into a jagged tear as the rift split wide. Sensors screamed across the Alliance fleet, the air aboard every ship tightening with the same tension that gripped River's chest. The Watchers had come again. But this time their numbers were different. Not a flood. Not an overwhelming storm. A single vanguard of vessels, smaller than before, their sleek hulls flickering with phasing resonance. They carried themselves like predators sent not to conquer but to test. Battle stations, Rivers ordered, his voice calm but edged with steel. The Razee 2 surged to the front with the Skuta V beside it, their halo nets flaring. Behind them, the Aegis fleet aligned into their lattice formation, shields overlapping, glowing faint blue arcs across the dark. The 6 ships unified, weaving their shield into a dome around Earth's line. Warhammers shifted into firing wedges, and above them loomed the remodeled walking bastions, their resonance shields shimmering like dark suns. The Watchers struck first. Beams of coiled energy lashed against the Aegis shield, but these were different, more precise, splitting into streams that burrowed into the lattice, seeking weakness. The dome shuddered but held, each impact rippling across the web. Then came the second strike. Particles invisible to human eyes lanced through the void, passing harmlessly through shields and armor before detonating within the systems they touched. Consoles sparked on the Razee 2, sensor suites went blind across a Warhammer, engines flickered on a Gemini cruiser. The weapons were surgical, designed not to destroy outright but to cripple. Rivers gritted his teeth. They're learning. The bastions answered. Their upgraded cannons roared, face-piercing rounds tearing into the Watcher formation. A ship flickering in shadow form was struck full force, its hull unraveling in arcs of black fire as the bastion's resonance guns ripped through dimensions. Another Watcher craft fell to the combined barrage of Warhammer fire, its hull fracturing before vanishing into fragments. General Tudor's voice cut across comms. Deploying Marines. For the first time, the new particle transporters hummed. A shimmer of light filled the decks of the Skuta V, and in the next instant Tudor and his strike teams materialized within a Watcher vessel. No pods. No breaches. Just sudden steel and fury in the enemy's heart. Gunfire tore through the black corridors. Marines appeared in clusters, rifles raised, grenades already primed, carving through alien decks with surgical precision. Watcher constructs reeled, unprepared for an enemy that could materialize directly into their cores. Explosions thundered inside their hulls, tearing systems apart from within. Outside, the Illyrian warship danced. It phased in and out of existence, striking at the flanks of the enemy formation, its crystalline cannons tearing through ships before their weapons could adjust. For a moment, the Alliance line surged forward, turning defense into offense. And then, as quickly as it began, the Watchers withdrew. Their ships slipped back into the rift without warning, their weapons silenced mid-strike, leaving wreckage drifting but no final push. The void quieted, the enemy gone. Rivers stared at the blank space where they had vanished. His gut twisted. They hadn't come to win. They had come to learn. The new weapons, the particle attacks, the phased strikes, all of it had been a test. A probe against Earth's defenses. And the Watchers had disappeared before the Alliance could show them everything they had prepared. "They're studying us," Rivers said quietly. "Every battle, every ship, every weapon. And the next time, it won't be a probe." The silence of the void felt heavier than any storm. The wreckage of the fallen Watcher ships drifted across Earth's orbit like broken teeth. Salvage crews swarmed them, cutters carving into alien steel, drones hauling fragments back to Sentinel's forges. What once would have been feared as untouchable was now dissected, catalogued, and turned into blueprints for survival. Among the recovered cores, engineers found the signature of the new Watcher weapons, particle streams invisible until they detonated within a ship's systems. They slipped through shields like whispers through walls, bypassing armor and burning consoles into silence. It was the most insidious strike the Alliance had yet faced. The Illyrian engineers worked without pause, their crystalline minds attuned to resonance the humans could not see. Days bled into weeks as they bent the problem into patterns, layering code upon code, until at last a solution emerged. Inside every modern shield, they wove a secondary lattice, low-frequency harmonics stolen from the archives of older, discarded technology. Ancient designs, dismissed as obsolete, had suddenly become the key. The resonance of the new shields disrupted the particle streams, scattering them before they could pass through. When the tests came, the results were undeniable. Particle strikes that once crippled ships now flared harmlessly against the lattice, dispersing into the void. The Alliance had adapted again. The upgrades spread fleet-wide. From the mighty warhammers to the smallest escorts, every vessel carried the new low-frequency lattice within its shields. The Aegis class wove them seamlessly into their unifying domes. Even the 4 walking bastions bore them, their vast shields layered with fire upon fire until they shimmered like miniature suns. And more, the Shadow and Sunfire were fitted with Illyrian phase drives. Now not only could they strike with devastating precision, but they could slip through the void itself, evading beams that would have sundered them. Twin blades sharpened to perfection, ready to dance on the knife's edge of battle. For 3 months, the Watchers did not come in force. They struck the edges instead, harassing outposts, burning colonies, and vanishing before fleets could respond. A war of attrition meant to bleed the Alliance slowly. But in those months, Earth and her allies turned silence into preparation. Orbital guns were mounted across Earth's skies, massive cannons locked into phasing systems that allowed them to flicker in and out of existence, evading Watcher counterfire. Lunar guns bristled from the gray soil of the moon, their barrels long enough to strike across the system. On Mars, on Titan, on outposts across the colonies, planetary cannons were raised into the stars. And the final traps were laid. The Halo shields, once simple domes of protection, were reforged with phase-resistant lattices. No longer could Watcher ships slip through as shadows. Now they would be caught, their phasing drives tearing themselves apart if they tried. Earth had become a fortress. The moon a bastion. The colonies a wall of steel and fire. In the quiet of the council chamber, Rivers listened to the reports. Orbital defenses online. Shield lattices installed. Phase drives tested. 3 Unity fleets ready with more in construction. The Alliance had prepared as if for the end of days. Still, River's gaze lingered on the stars outside the viewport. He had learned one truth in all his years of war. No fortress was ever perfect. No wall ever unbreachable. And he knew, beyond the silence of the rift, the Watchers were watching, waiting, preparing their own storm. The rift split wide over Earth, tearing open the sky with a roar of shadow. This time, the Watchers did not come with probing fleets or flickering skirmishers. They came with monsters. 2 ships emerged, each the size of a world. Their hulls stretched wider than Earth's orbitals, their shadows blotting constellations from the sky. They were not leviathans, not Unity constructs, but something greater. Vessels whose bridges spanned miles, whose weapons could scar planets, whose presence made even the bastions seem small. Across the Alliance fleet, alarms screamed. Crews froze at the sight. Even the most battle-hardened eyes widened. But Rivers did not falter. He had been waiting for this. "Raise the halo shields," he commanded. The void lit blue as Earth's new lattices flared to life. Orbital guns phased in and out, shimmering as they primed. Lunar cannons rose from the moon's surface, their barrels glowing. Planetary cannons aligned, Titan and Mars bristling with fire. The Aegis-class fleet locked shields into one unified dome, a wall that shimmered like a second atmosphere over Earth itself. The Watchers fired first. Particle streams lanced toward the Aegis shield, splitting into precise lines that once would have cut through consoles and reactors. But this time, the new low-frequency lattice shimmered. The beams scattered, dissolving into harmless ripples that vanished in the void. The Watchers did not know. Their second strike came harder, but with the same result. Shields flaring, lattices scattering, Earth untouched. "Now," Rivers said. The bastions fired. Their new resonance cannons ripped through shadow and light alike, punching straight into the vast ship's hulls. Warhammers followed, barrages striking true, their fire finally piercing vessels that had once seemed untouchable. The shadow and sunfire darted forward, phasing through volleys that would have annihilated them, cutting arcs of fire into the giant's flanks. And then General Tudor made his move. The particle transporters hummed, Marines standing ready in full kit, eyes set with iron. Tudor raised his gauntlet fist. "Send us through." Light shimmered, and in an instant hundreds of Marines materialized inside the bridge of the first Watcher world ship. Alien commanders twisted in surprise as gunfire erupted point blank. Blades flashed, grenades detonated, and Tudor's Marines carved a path through shadowed corridors that spanned miles. At his side, Illyrian Marines moved with crystalline grace, phasing between bulkheads, cutting down constructs before they could rally. Together, they drove deeper until they stood in the command core itself, the vessel's black heart throbbing like a star. Charges were set, weapons leveled, but then the Illyrians acted. "Not destroyed," their commander said, voice calm even amid chaos. "Claimed." They activated the fold space beacon. The Watcher vessel shuddered, and in a flash of light, it vanished from the battlefield. Safe in fold space beyond the Watcher's reach, it was diverted to Sentinel's vaults, to be stripped and studied. Tudor wasted no time. His Marines transported again, this time into the second vessel. Another storm of fire, another brutal fight across alien bridges and endless corridors. And once more the Illyrians triggered fold space, vanishing the vessel before the Watchers could counter. 2 world ships captured intact. On the field outside, the remaining Watcher fleet faltered. Their weapons failed against shields that should not have held, their largest vessels ripped from their grasp. For the first time, they pulled back, not in calculated retreat but in shock. The rift sealed behind them, silence returning to the void. The cheer that erupted across the fleets was thunderous. Crews roared with triumph, voices breaking through static-laden comms. Earth had not only held, it had captured. At Sentinel, the 2 world ships shimmered into orbit, their massive frames dwarfing even the bastions. Teams of engineers swarmed them within hours, cutting, studying, unlocking secrets once thought beyond mortal reach. Already, Illyrian minds and human scientists bent their thoughts to what could be taken, what could be remade, what could be turned against the Watchers themselves. Rivers stood on the bridge of the Razee 2, watching the silent horizon. His fleet had done what once seemed impossible. They had broken the unbreakable. But he knew, as every commander in the Alliance knew, that the Watchers would not forget this humiliation. They would return with fury. And when they did, the fire of Earth would burn brighter still. In the cold heart of the rift, the Watchers convened. Their voices, chords of resonance and thought, were dissonant now, not with panic but with fury. The loss of 2 world ships, vessels woven over centuries, was an affront they had not expected. That prey could strike, claim, and vanish their titans into fold space was a fracture in their perfect order. The currents of their communion seethed. One spoke of escalation, to release the great unmaking vessel still under construction, to burn Earth and Sentinel alike into ash. Another counseled patience to let prey fatten further, to harvest at the height of their strength. Others pulsed with fragmented visions of war unending. But all agreed on one truth: the prey had overreached. They had stolen too much. And for that, the harvest would come sooner than intended. At Sentinel, the 2 captured world ships hung in orbit like dark moons. Engineers swarmed their surfaces, cutting through alien steel with beams that screamed against the resonance within. Illyrians worked shoulder to shoulder with human scientists, deciphering cores, weapon nodes, and drive systems that bent logic with every scan. Inside the heart of the first vessel, they found something unexpected. Not weapons, not shield lattices, but a map, coordinates etched in resonance code, locked deep within the core. At first, no one understood. Then Stephen stepped forward. He studied the data in silence, his expression sharpening. "I know these," he said at last. "This isn't random. It's their origin point. The Watcher's cradle." The chamber fell silent. The unknown quadrant of the galaxy it pointed to was untouched, unexplored, a void where no Alliance chart had ever reached. Rivers gave a sharp nod. "Isabella II will scout. Quietly. We'll wait for her report." But the discoveries did not end there. In the archives of Sentinel itself, buried beneath centuries of layered data, Stephen unearthed something else. Fragments of a record speaking of another planet. Its coordinates were scattered, hidden, but as he pieced them together, the implication became clear. A second Sentinel. The thought alone made the Council tremble. True, then somewhere in the void was another shield world, forged perhaps with different purpose, hidden since before the war began. Rivers wasted no time. Orders rippled through the fleet. The Razee 2 and Skuda V prepared for departure, flanked by the Aegis Line and 2 massive carriers laden with Marines, Illyrian scientists, and engineers. Their destination: the planet Stephen had uncovered, a world that might hold the key to surviving the storm yet to come. As the fleet ignited their drives, the stars ahead shimmered with possibility and dread. One path led to the Watcher's cradle, the other to secrets buried in the dark. Both could change everything. And somewhere in the rift, the Watchers stirred, aware their prey had begun to hunt. The Isabella II slipped into the void like a whisper. Her cloaks shimmered once, then vanished into the darkness, her drives running silent. Every crew member aboard knew what they carried: the weight of being the first to stare into the heart of the Watchers. The coordinates burned in their NAV screens, a string of symbols no human hand had ever charted. Days passed in quiet travel, every jump carrying them deeper into regions where no Alliance star maps existed. The void itself seemed to change, darker, heavier, as if space resisted their presence. When they emerged, the crew fell silent. Before them stretched a graveyard of worlds. Stars bled dim red light, their warmth long gone, their orbits littered with debris. And in the center of it all, the Forge. It was no ship, no planet, but a construct the size of a solar system, a black lattice of living steel that wrapped around a dying sun. Rivers of resonance pulsed through it like veins, and within its frame, titans stirred. Leviathans, unity constructs, and worse, silhouettes of vessels larger still, half-born, waiting to be unleashed. The Watcher's cradle. The Isabella II did not linger long. She scanned, recorded, and turned away. But even as she slipped back into fold space, sensors spiked. A ripple passed across the lattice. The Watchers had noticed. The ship fled, drives screaming against the dark. 4 hours they ran, pursued by shadows that flickered in and out of existence. Only when they crossed into Alliance space again did the pressure lift. The Isabella II had survived, but she carried with her a truth the Council could not ignore. The Watchers were building something greater than war. They were building the end. Far from the cradle, the main fleet descended upon a world shrouded in storms. Lightning tore across its skies, ion clouds scattering sensors, but beneath the veil lay unmistakable geometry. Towers like mountains jutted from the surface, their lines sharp and deliberate. Sentinel's design, but grander. Rivers stood on the bridge of the Razee 2 as the planet came into view. His eyes narrowed, his hands clasped behind his back. "Stephen was right," he murmured. "Another sentinel." The Skuda V orbited low, scanning the atmosphere. Aegis shields flared against the storms, their domes glowing in flashes of electric fire. The carriers dropped Marines and Illyrian scientists to the surface, transporters shimmering as boots struck alien soil. What they found was not a forge world, not a hollow sphere filled with fire and industry, but a vault world. Its towers hummed faintly as though power still flowed within them. Massive gates lay buried beneath rock and sand, sealed since ages beyond memory. Tudor led the Marines across the blasted plains, his voice hard but steady. "Clear the approaches. If this place wakes, we'll be standing in the middle of it." Illyrian engineers pressed hands against crystalline consoles embedded in the walls. The towers pulsed faintly in answer, as though recognizing something long forgotten. When the gates began to open, the ground trembled like a living thing. Dust cascaded into the air and a low hum filled the sky. Rivers' comms lit with Stephen's voice. "Admiral, this isn't just a second sentinel. It's older. Maybe the first. And whatever sleeps here, it's not meant for building ships. It's meant for something else." The storm above raged louder. The gates yawned wider. And deep inside, lights flickered awake for the first time in millennia. The gates opened into a chasm so vast it swallowed the horizon. The Marines advanced cautiously, floodlights cutting through the dust, weapons raised as the ground shook with each tremor. Illyrian engineers fanned out, their crystalline scanners pulsing with light, reading the alien signatures woven into every wall. Stephen walked at the front, his eyes fixed on the patterns glowing faintly beneath the stone. He traced them with his fingers, muttering in awe. "This isn't just another sentinel. It predates them all. This is a cradle world. Not for the Watchers. For something older." The corridors stretched into caverns where towers of machinery rose like forests of steel. In the center stood a console larger than the Razee 2's bridge, its surfaces etched with symbols half buried in dust. When Stephen activated it, the ground beneath them shifted. Images bloomed across the chamber. Maps of a galaxy in an age before the Watchers, fleets of ships that shimmered with outlines unlike anything the Alliance had known. Worlds marked with symbols that pulsed like stars. And among them, a set of coordinates burned brighter than the rest. Stephen's breath caught. "It's a Hayur, a hidden world. There's a fleet waiting there, older than the Watchers themselves." Rivers leaned forward over the holomap, his voice steady. "Show me." They found more than maps. Buried deep within the vaults were weapon blueprints, designs for systems the Alliance could scarcely comprehend. One pulsed in particular, a weapon that could summon storms, channeling lightning across the void. Not plasma, not energy beams, but arcs that chained from target to target, striking fleets like a living storm. Illyrian engineers whispered in awe. Humans stared in disbelief. With enough power, such a weapon could scour entire formations before they had time to raise shields. And then they found the ships. 3 vast vessels lay buried in a subterranean bay, sealed in darkness, untouched for untold millennia. Their frames pulsed faintly as though existing in several places at once. Scanners struggled to pin them down, reading them in 2, 3, even 4 dimensions simultaneously. Marines walked around them, their outlines shimmering like ghosts when they passed too close. Stephen whispered the only word that came to him. Multiversal phase alignment. Weapons can't even see them, let alone strike them. Rivers stood before the ghostly giants, arms folded. "They don't belong to the Watchers. They belong to us now." The decision was immediate. The Gemini fleet was summoned, their escorts bristling with weapons as they descended into the vault. Tractor beams engaged, particle drives pulsed, and slowly, impossibly, the 3 ancient ships rose from their tomb. They shimmered as they moved, shifting in and out of phase, their outlines bending light like water. Marines and engineers watched in awe as the giants passed, silent as specters. "Take them to Sentinel I," Rivers ordered. "Every scientist, every engineer, every forge we have will tear them apart and rebuild them. If we can understand even half of what they are, we'll have a weapon the Watchers can't match." The Gemini fleet fell into formation, the 3 spectral vessels at their center. They moved with eerie grace, untouched by turbulence, flickering in and out of the visible spectrum as they climbed toward the void. For a moment, the storm overhead parted. Lightning arced across the clouds as though saluting the ship's rebirth. Rivers watched them vanish into orbit, his expression hard. The Watchers had taken worlds, fleets, and lives without end. But now the Alliance held something older than their enemy. Something the Watchers themselves had feared enough to bury. And when the time came, he intended to use it. The council chamber was silent as the feed from the Isabella II played. Images shimmered above the table, grainy scans of the Watcher's cradle. A lattice larger than worlds, wrapped around a dying sun. Leviathans drifting like insects in comparison. Unity constructs stacked in layers, their hulls unfinished. And at the center, the shadow of something so vast that the sensors failed to render its full dimensions. The chamber darkened as the playback ended. No one spoke for long seconds. Even the most seasoned counselors, men and women hardened by war and loss, stared at the hollow image with pale faces. Admiral Rivers broke the silence. His voice was iron but low. "The Watchers aren't just building ships. They're building the end. If this thing wakes, nothing we've made will be enough." The Illyrian envoy inclined his crystalline head. Yet their focus betrays them. They are preparing. They are not yet ready. Stephen rose from his seat, eyes still locked on the frozen image. "Which means we have time. Not much, but enough. If we keep pushing, if we keep building, we might strike before that thing leaves its cradle." The chamber erupted into debate. Some voices calling for immediate offense, others insisting on defense, others still fearing that to strike now would only hasten destruction. But in the end, the council deferred to Rivers. "We hold," he said. "We strengthen. When we strike, it won't be desperation. It will be the blow that ends this war." The decision settled like stone. Outside, the stars burned on, indifferent. Far from the council's debates, the Gemini fleet cut across the void in perfect formation. At its heart, 3 ghost ships shimmered, their outlines flickering between dimensions, scanners struggling to hold them steady. The fleet kept their distance from the ancient vessels, escorting them like sacred relics. Marines stood ready in dropships. Scientists monitored every pulse of energy. Engineers whispered over readings they could scarcely comprehend. The ghost ships radiated an aura unlike anything in living memory. Some crews swore they heard whispers when they passed too close. Others claimed their instruments showed reflections of stars that did not exist. And yet, the vessels obeyed, drifting steadily towards Sentinel I's orbit under the guidance of the Gemini escorts. Commander Jorel of the Gemini fleet reported to Rivers as the fleet closed in. "Admiral, the ships are stable, or as stable as they can be. Whatever dimensional resonance they operate in, it hasn't interfered with our drives. But my men don't like being near them. They say it feels like flying alongside Ghost." Rivers' reply was clipped. "Ghosts or not, they're ours now. Keep them moving. No delays." As the ghost ships neared Sentinel I, the shield world itself seemed to respond. Its forges flared brighter, resonance harmonics pulsing in strange patterns as though recognizing kin. Stephen, watching from the surface, felt the hairs rise on his neck. "They were meant to be here," he whispered. "These ships, they were waiting to return." Sentinel's docks opened, and the giants began their slow descent. The Gemini fleet held the perimeter, their ships bristling with firepower, eyes turned outward toward the rift. For if the Watchers realized what the Alliance had just reclaimed, they would come. And the next storm would fall upon Sentinel itself. The 3 ghost ships settled into orbit above Sentinel I like silent gods. Their forms shimmered in and out of phase, at times appearing solid, at others translucent, as though slipping between layers of existence. No matter how the engineers scanned, the readings never matched twice. Docking arms extended carefully, trembling as they latched onto the vessel's shifting hulls. The forges of Sentinel flared, resonance patterns cascading across its surface in ways no one had seen before. It was as though the shield world itself recognized the ships. Inside the laboratories, Illyrian engineers pressed their crystalline hands to consoles while human scientists fed data into models that could barely hold together. Every system they probed unraveled into something deeper. Layers of drives stacked atop phase harmonics, reactors pulsing with energies that slipped into dimensions they could not measure. General Tudor watched with folded arms, his marines standing in the shadows like silent guardians. "Handle them with care," he muttered. "If these things wake on their own, we may not be able to put them back down." Stephen was everywhere at once, moving between labs, forges, and the hangar bay where smaller drones probed the ship's outer hulls. His face was pale, but his eyes burned with a scholar's fire. "These vessels are not just older than the Watchers," he explained to Rivers over a secure channel. "They're of a civilization that fought the Watchers once, long before us. Look here." He transmitted schematics, blueprints etched into the ships themselves. Weapons designed to fire like storms. Not beams, not plasma, lightning itself channeled through void space. They don't strike just one target. They arc between fleets. Rivers studied the schematics in silence. A weapon that could turn entire armadas into kindling. "And more," Stephen continued, his voice dropping. "These ships aren't bound to one reality. They exist in several at once. That's why weapons pass through them. They're untouchable in combat unless they choose to be struck." Rivers' jaw tightened. "Can we replicate it?" Stephen hesitated. "Not yet, but we can learn. And every lesson brings us closer." Work crews began the long process of integration. Illyrians wove resonance harmonics into the ship's cores, syncing them with Sentinel's pulse. Human engineers traced weapons mounts, copying storm cannon designs into blueprints for new builds. Marines stood ready in the docking bays, training to deploy aboard the ghost ships the moment they were made combat ready. As the weeks passed, the Alliance arsenal swelled. Warhammers rolled from Sentinel's bays, Aegis shields multiplied, bastions were refitted with resonance plating. But it was the ghost ships that drew every eye. Their silent, shifting forms hung over Sentinel like omens, promising salvation or doom. One night, as storms rippled across Sentinel's surface, one of the ghost ships flared with light. Its hull shimmered, its engines pulsed, and for a single heartbeat, it moved under its own power. The resonance harmonics cascaded across Sentinel's forges in response, brighter than any fire before. The shield world was waking something long forgotten, and every watcher in the rift would feel it. The rift pulsed with unease. The watchers felt it, a resonance ripple that spread across dimensions like a wound reopening. The ghost ships, the ancient vessels that had once fought them, had awakened. Their communion was filled with discordant chords, their thoughts fracturing and weaving again as they debated. Some urged immediate destruction, to strike Sentinel with everything they had before the prey could learn too much. Others counseled restraint, whispering that to strike too soon would reveal weapons not yet ready. A few voices, darker still, resonated with hunger. A thrill that their ancient enemy had been stirred, for it meant the harvest would be all the richer. They remembered the war long before. The storm weapons, the fleets that flickered between realities, the battles that had scarred stars. They had consumed those civilizations, but not without cost. And now the prey had uncovered the bones of that old defiance. The Watchers agreed on only one truth: the cradle would accelerate its work. The great vessel at its heart, the unmaking ship, would be brought to life sooner than planned. The prey had claimed ghosts. The Watchers would answer with oblivion. On Sentinel, the ghost ships continued to hum with strange light, but Rivers did not linger to watch them awaken. In the council chamber, Stephen laid out the coordinates he had uncovered in the first Sentinel's vaults. A hangar world. A fleet older still. If the records were true, ships waited there that had never faced the Watcher's fire, sealed away when their builders vanished into history. Perhaps their last chance to tip the scales before the rift unleashed its final storm. Rivers made the decision without hesitation. The Razee II and Skuda V would lead the expedition, joined by the Aegis line and 2 carriers filled with Marines, Illyrian engineers and scientists. Stephen would ride at Rivers' side, the keeper of the ancient knowledge. Before departure, Rivers stood one last time in Sentinel's command dome, gazing at the 3 ghost ships flickering in orbit. He prayed they would be ready if the Watchers struck while he was gone. "Sentinel will hold," he told the council. And when we return, we'll bring more than ghosts. We'll bring a fleet that remembers how to kill watchers." The fleet's drives lit the void, folding space into ripples as they vanished toward the unknown. Every man and woman aboard knew the stakes. They had to return before the Watchers unleashed their next attack. And somewhere in the black, the Watchers already stirred, waiting for the moment when Earth's shield would be tested again. The stars above Earth had grown quiet, too quiet. Within Sentinel, alarms ran constant drills, the forges burning without pause as every dockyard spat out frigates, destroyers, and escort craft. Orbital guns shimmered in and out of phase across Earth's skies, lunar cannons tracked silently from the gray plains, and the planetary batteries of Mars and Titan stood ready. The 3 ghost ships hovered above Sentinel, half in this world, half in another. Engineers reported progress, storm cannons coming online, resonance drives humming louder each day, but none dared say they were ready. Not yet. General Tudor drilled his Marines relentlessly, the particle transporters now second nature. They practiced insertions into simulated Watcher constructs, appearing and vanishing like shadows, leaving destruction in their wake. The Illyrians trained beside them, crystalline bodies pulsing with alien energy, their harmony with the new tech making them lethal in ways humans could only imitate. And yet tension thickened like fog. Every time the rift sensors hummed, officers froze. Every ripple of resonance was watched with dread. They knew the Watchers would come. They just did not know when. Sentinel braced, Earth braced, the colonies braced. But without Rivers, without the Razee 2 and Scuda V, without the Aegis fleet at the core, the defenders could not shake the feeling that the storm would fall when they were weakest. Far across the void, the expedition fleet slipped into the shadow of a dead star. The coordinates burned true, guiding them to a world swallowed in darkness. Its surface was cracked and broken, a shell of stone wrapped around something greater. The Razee 2 led the descent, scanners cutting through the stormed atmosphere until the outlines appeared. Massive structures, buried beneath rock and ash, hummed with a power that had not died. A hangar larger than any fortress, its gates sealed but intact. Stephen's voice trembled with awe. "It's here," just as the vault said. A fleet, waiting. The Marines deployed, carving through stone and dust until the hangar's gates groaned open. Light spilled outward, ancient but still alive, illuminating a chamber vast enough to house a world. And within it, the fleet stirred. Dozens, perhaps hundreds, of vessels unlike anything the Alliance had yet seen. Their forms blended Illyrian curves with sharper lines of design lost to time, each one pulsing faintly with the same multiversal shimmer as the ghost ships. Weapons bristled from their hulls, some recognizable, others alien even to Stephen's eyes. Lightning coils ran along spines like veins, arcs flickering faintly across them even in slumber. 3 of the nearest vessels began to awaken as the gates opened wider, their storm cannons pulsing, their drives humming as though waiting for a voice to command them again. Rivers stood on the deck of the Razee 2, his gaze fixed on the sight that stretched before him. His voice was quiet, but every officer around him heard the weight behind it. "We came here hoping for ships. What we've found," he paused, the words heavy in his throat. "This may be the key to ending them." Behind them, the storm of the dead star rumbled like an omen. And beyond, somewhere in the rift, the Watchers began to turn their gaze toward the void that had once defeated them. The rift tore open above Earth with a soundless scream, splitting the void wide. Sentinel's alarms blared as Watcher signatures flooded in. Dozens at first, then hundreds, flickering in and out of phase as they poured toward the Alliance's defenses. This was no probe. This was a strike meant to test the walls Earth had built in River's absence. The 3 ghost ships flickered in orbit, still silent, their systems resisting full integration. They could not yet fight. The burden fell to the fleets already forged. The walking bastions moved first, their resonance shields flaring into suns of blue light. Their storm cannons roared, arcs of chained lightning leaping from ship to ship, tearing through the first wave of Watcher frigates. The Aegis fleet locked into formation, shields interwoven into a dome that shimmered across Earth's orbit. Particle beams struck, but the low-frequency lattices scattered them into harmless ripples. For the first time, the Watchers' new precision weapons found no purchase. The warhammers surged behind them, firing in perfect unison. Each barrage tore through shadowed hulls, forcing the enemy back. Lunar cannons fired from the moon, Titan's guns lit the dark, and Earth's orbitals phased in and out of existence, evading counterstrikes as they hammered into the Watcher line. Still, the assault pressed hard. Watcher ships phased past screens, appearing deep inside the defense grid, only to be caught in upgraded halo shields that tore their drives apart. Others focused fire on the bastions, hammering at their resonance layers until even those Titans staggered. And then General Tudor unleashed his surprise. Particle transporters flared aboard the Skuta V, the Aegis, and the bastions. Marines and Illyrians materialized directly onto Watcher decks, rifles blazing, blades cutting, charges planted. Whole vessels tore apart from within, their own cores detonating as Alliance troops vanished back into safety before the explosions hit. The tide turned. By the battle's end, sentinels still stood. Earth's skies were scarred, wreckage drifted thick across orbit, but the line had not broken. For the first time in the war, the Watchers had been repelled in full view of every world watching. The news spread across colonies and outposts like fire. Earth was no longer prey. Earth was fortress. Yet even in victory, unease remained. The enemy had tested the walls and found them strong. The next strike would not be probing. It would be war. Far from the storm, the Razee II Skuta V and their escorts descended deeper into the ancient hangar world. Marines fanned across titanic decks. Illyrians pressed crystalline hands to consoles that had not been touched for millennia, and Stephen deciphered symbols that pulsed like stars come alive. And then, with a low hum that shook the ground, the first of the ancient ships awoke. Storm cannons lit along its spine, arcs of lightning crawling across its hull. Its drives pulsed in and out of phase, existing in 2, 3, 4 places at once before settling, shimmering with alien power. 2 more stirred beside it, their cores igniting like the hearts of stars, weapons shimmering with energies the Alliance had no names for. The fleet was waking. Rivers stood on the bridge of the Razee II, watching through the viewport as the Titans rose from their tombs. His voice was quiet, but every officer felt the weight of it. "We came for hope. Looks like we found thunder." And as the forgotten fleet stretched its limbs, the void trembled, as though even the Watchers could feel that something long buried had returned. The hangar world shook as ancient systems groaned to life. Dust cascaded from ceilings that had not trembled in millennia, and consoles long cold flickered with light as Illyrian engineers pressed their crystalline palms to their cores. The first ship rose from its cradle, its hull shimmering in layers of dimension. For a moment it was not there at all, then it snapped back into sight, arcs of stormlight crawling across its spine. The roar of its awakening was not sound but resonance, a low hum that rattled every bone in every chest. Stephen's voice quivered as he translated the symbols racing across the consoles. Designation: Arclight. Primary armament: storm cannons. Capable of chaining lightning strikes across multiple targets at once, bypassing shields entirely. Secondary armament: dimensional disruptors. Designed to unravel enemy phasing drives. The Marines stared in awe, their rifles lowered. Even hardened soldiers who had fought Leviathans and Unity constructs stood silent before the power now stirring. The second ship stirred next, its hull darker, heavier. "Tempest," Stephen whispered as he read. "A carrier. But not like ours. It doesn't deploy ships. It deploys storms. Weaponized weather. Self-contained anomalies that tear apart fleets caught inside." The third followed, smaller than the first 2 but sharper, its lines cutting like a blade through reality itself. It flickered 3 times before stabilizing. "Zephyr," Stephen said. "Fast attack cruiser. Multiversal phasing is its core design. It can exist in 3 realities at once, fire from all of them and return untouched." Rivers stood with arms folded, his face unreadable but his eyes alight. "How many more?" Stephen gestured toward the vast chamber beyond, still filled with sleeping giants. "Dozens, maybe hundreds, but they're dormant. These 3 were closest to the surface. We can't wake them all at once. The resonance field would tear the planet apart. We'll have to take them slowly, 1 fleet at a time." The Illyrians were already at work, weaving their harmonics into the ship's cores, syncing them with Alliance command networks. Marines drilled within the cavernous decks, learning to navigate corridors that seemed to bend and fold as though the ships themselves were alive. When Arclight storm cannons fired for the first time, the test shook the skies. Lightning burst from its spines, leaping across target drones placed in orbit, chaining through them until every last one was torn apart in arcs of blinding fury. No shield held. No armor resisted. It was as though the void itself had turned predator. Rivers gripped the railing as he watched. His lips pressed thin, his voice low. That's what we'll bring to them. The forgotten fleet remained cloaked within the hangar world, its resonance harmonics bent inward, unreadable even to Sentinel's long-range sensors. Rivers ordered it so. No transmissions, no signals, nothing to betray their find. Only the ships they could awaken would leave, escorted in silence to Sentinel Eye for study. Tudor drilled Marines on the particle transporters inside Zephyr, training them to deploy in multiple realities at once. Illyrian engineers sang harmonics into Tempest's storm core, coaxing its weaponized anomalies into controlled patterns. Humans crawled through Arclight, adapting its lightning coils to Alliance targeting systems. Every hour brought progress. Every test proved these ships were not relics, but weapons made for the war the Alliance was now fighting. But River's order remained firm. The Watchers must not know. Not until the day the thunder broke over them. Stephen stood with him as the three ships lifted into the sky, their multiversal hulls flickering in and out of sight. When they see these, Stephen murmured, they'll remember. They'll remember what it was like to lose. River's jaw tightened. And this time it'll be the last thing they see. The expedition fleet prepared to return, the three awakened giants at their center. Earth waited, Sentinel braced, and the Alliance prayed the storm would not fall before thunder could return. The council chamber thrummed with restrained urgency. Maps of the Sol system floated above the table, layered with defense grids, patrol routes, and orbital batteries. Fleet commanders moved tokens across the projection like chess pieces, their voices sharp but low, each one aware that the Watchers could strike again at any moment. Sentinel's overseer gave his report. 3 Unity sets complete and active. The bastions continue upgrades, storm cannons nearly integrated. Orbital phasing guns across Earth, Mars, Titan, and the Moon are synced to Halo shield lattices. Enemy incursions will not pass without paying in blood. General Tudor stood like a wall of iron, arms crossed, his Marines behind him in silence. The transporters are ready. If they breach our lines, they'll find us on their bridges before they fire a second volley. Illyrian envoy Vaith shifted, his crystalline body glowing faintly. The ghost ships remain dormant, but integration advances. Within weeks, one may be fully combat ready. Until then, they must not be risked. The counselors argued, but beneath the debate lay the same truth. This was not defense anymore. This was preparation for a war that would decide whether the Alliance would live at all. Above Earth, fleets orbited in endless drills. Warhammers cut in and out of formations. The Aegis ships tested their unified shield again and again, battering it with barges until it held steady. Bastions loomed like mountains, lightning storm cannons arcing test fire across controlled sectors of void. Civilian eyes turned upward each night, and for the first time, they saw protection instead of helplessness. Yet every commander knew it was a fragile calm. The Watchers had not struck again, but they would. Fold space rippled open beyond the Kuiper belt, and the Razee 2 led the expedition fleet home. At her flanks shimmered Arclight, Tempest, and Zephyr, the 3 titans of the forgotten fleet. Their hulls flickered between dimensions, half there, half elsewhere, as though reality itself bent to make room for them. The Gemini fleet held escort, weapons primed, eyes sharp. No Watchers followed. The secrecy of the hangar world had held. As they entered Sol space, alarms tripped across Sentinel's networks, then stilled as the IFF codes registered. The forges flared brighter, resonance harmonics cascading across the shield world as though recognizing the newcomers. Entire docking arms shifted course to receive them, their structures humming in unfamiliar patterns. Rivers stood at the viewport of the Razee 2, his hands clasped behind his back. He said nothing at first, simply watching the 3 giants follow in formation. Each shimmered like a storm contained, their cores humming with the promise of annihilation. Stephen moved beside him, his voice hushed. When the council sees these, it will change everything. They'll know we're not fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting for victory. River's eyes stayed fixed on Sentinel, now gleaming like a sun with the light of its forges. "Then let's show them," he said. The fleet descended, engines glowing against the void. On Sentinel's surface, crowds gathered at the viewing domes as the three Titans slipped into orbit, their lightning coils sparking in silence. The Alliance had new weapons now, weapons older than the Watchers themselves, and soon they would be tested. The council chamber was silent as the holofeed lit up with the three new arrivals. Arclight, Tempest, and Zephyr drifted above Sentinel, their multiversal hulls flickering in and out of existence like half-remembered dreams. Lightning arced faintly along Arclight's spine. The storm core of Tempest pulsed in rhythms that defied sensors. Zephyr shimmered in 3 places at once, its outline breaking into echoes before snapping back into singular form. No one spoke at first. Counselor Devrin, known for his sharp tongue and skepticism, leaned forward, his voice barely a whisper. "Are they ours?" Stephen nodded. "They answer to us now. Ancient, yes, but not dead. They've been waiting." Murmurs rippled across the chamber. Words like impossible and legend floated, but none dared dismiss what they saw. Even the Illyrian envoy Vaith, usually impassive, pulsed brighter than ever before. "These vessels were myths even to my people," he said softly. "Weapons that fought the Watchers before they became gods in the void." Admiral Rivers stood at the center of the chamber, arms folded, eyes hard. "They're not myths anymore. They're ours. And when the Watchers come again, these ships will break them." The council erupted into debate, but this time it was not fear. It was awe. It was possibility. Some demanded the ships be fielded immediately, others urged caution, insisting they be studied first. Yet all agreed on one truth: the balance had shifted again. Across Sol, the fleets reacted with the same awe. Warhammer crews stared from viewports as Arclight tested its storm cannons in controlled drills, lightning leaping across simulated targets until the void itself glowed. Marines aboard the Scuda V whispered in reverence as Zephyr phased in and out, striking from 3 realities at once. The Bastion's crews saluted when Tempest unleashed its first weaponized anomaly, a storm that swallowed drones whole and left nothing but ash. Hope surged. For the first time, ordinary soldiers believed they could win. Not just survive, not just endure, but win. Yet amidst the rising morale, River's voice remained cold steel. "Do not forget, these ships are weapons. The Watchers will come to unmake us. These give us a chance, nothing more." And then the rift tore open. This time it was not probing fleets or harassing raids. It was a wall of darkness stretching across the void. Hundreds of ships poured forth, Unity constructs at their front, flanked by phasing predators that flickered in and out like blades of shadow. And behind them loomed something new, Titans shaped like shattered moons, their hulls bleeding resonance fire, their cores burning with the same energy as the cradle itself. Alarms screamed across Sentinel. The fleets surged to position, bastions locking shields, Aegis domes flaring, warhammers aligning their cannons. Marines rushed to particle transport staging grounds. Illyrians tuned their harmonics to the storm. On the bridge of the Razee 2, River's voice cut through the noise. "All fleets to battle stations. Stand firm. Let them come." Lightning flickered across Arclight's hull, Tempest's storm core hummed, and Zephyr shimmered like a phantom eager for its first hunt. The Watchers did not yet know what awaited them. The battle for Earth's skies was about to begin. The rift howled wider, spilling fire and shadow into Sol space. Watcher warships poured through in endless waves, Unity constructs surging at the front, phasing predators flickering in and out, and behind them the new Titans, each the size of fractured moons, their cores pulsing with resonance storms. The Alliance answered. The walking bastions thundered forward, their resonance shields flaring into suns of blue light. Lightning roared from their storm cannons, arcs leaping across entire squadrons of Watcher frigates, chaining through them until they shattered in clouds of fire. Warhammers formed wedges behind them, their barrages timed in unison, punching holes in the advancing line. The Aegis fleet locked into place above Earth, shields woven together into a shimmering dome that bent and scattered the precision beams of the Watchers' particle weapons. What once had crippled the Alliance now fizzled harmlessly against their upgraded lattices. And then the new Titans of the Forgotten Fleet moved. Arclight was first. Its storm cannons flared, unleashing bolts of lightning that leapt across the void like a living tempest. One struck a Unity construct, then chained across 5 more ships, ripping them apart in seconds. Crews across the Alliance watched in awe as entire formations dissolved in arcs of fury. Tempest followed. Its storm core pulsed, and suddenly the battlefield itself changed. A contained anomaly spread outward from its hull, a swirling storm of ionized energy that swallowed Watcher Squadrons whole. Within its reach, their phasing drives sputtered, their weapons faltered, and their hulls cracked apart as if caught in a hurricane made of fire. Then came Zephyr. It flickered, vanishing from the battlefield entirely, only to reappear in 3 places at once, striking from every angle. Its cannons fired in synchronous harmony, tearing through Watcher predators that could not adapt fast enough to its multiversal dance. Beams passed through it harmlessly, striking nothing but shadows as the ship phased out again. The Watchers reeled. Their new Titans unleashed massive resonance barrages, beams that could have split moons, but the Aegis dome held. Particle transporters flared, and General Tudor's Marines materialized aboard the nearest enemy vessels. Gunfire erupted inside shadowed corridors, charges tore through cores, and whole Watcher ships convulsed as they died from within. For the first time, the battlefield did not tilt toward despair. It tilted toward victory. Yet the Watchers adapted. Their Titans shifted, bleeding resonance storms that warped space itself. One strike broke through a Warhammer's shields, ripping the ship in half. Another beam struck a bastion, cracking its armor wide open, though the giant fought on, cannons blazing even as its decks burned. Still the Alliance pressed harder. The storm from Arclight leapt again, tearing into a Titan's shields. Zephyr phased directly inside its armor, firing point-blank before vanishing again. Tempest's anomaly expanded, catching another Unity formation and crushing it into wreckage. Then came the killing blow. The Bastions and Warhammers concentrated everything on a single Titan, hammering it with fire until its resonance core faltered. Arclight's storm cannon arced into the breach, lightning striking deep. The Titan convulsed, its hull unraveling in a flood of shadow and fire. The void lit like a dying star as the Titan exploded. Cheers erupted across the fleets. But River's voice cut through the comms, hard and unyielding. Do not celebrate. Do not stop. They will not break easily. Finish it. The battle raged on, thunder against shadow, lightning against darkness. Earth's skies became the crucible of fire where the Alliance proved it was no longer prey. And though the Watchers pressed with fury, they now faced something they had never anticipated. The Forgotten Fleet had returned. The void burned brighter than any star. Lightning from Arclight leapt across the battlefield in storm chains, ripping through squadrons like a predator unleashed. Tempest's anomaly widened, swallowing whole clusters of phasing ships, dragging them into a maelstrom of crackling light and tearing them apart. Zephyr danced like a phantom, striking and vanishing, impossible to pin down, impossible to kill. The Bastions roared defiance, their storm cannons splitting the dark. The Aegis dome held against the Watchers' precision beams, scattering every strike. Marines materialized aboard enemy Titans, their rifles blazing, explosions tearing through alien corridors. For the first time, victory seemed not only possible but near. And then the rift widened. Every sensor screamed as the stars bent inward, light warping as something vast pushed against the veil. The shadow that emerged dwarfed the Titans already on the field. Larger than the Leviathan, larger than the planet ships, its silhouette blotted out constellations. Stephen's voice cracked over the comms. That's it. The unmaking ship. The one they were building at the cradle. The fleets faltered for a heartbeat as the monstrous vessel drifted into view, its surface bristling with weapons that glowed with resonance fire, its core burning so bright the void itself seemed to recoil. It fired once. A beam ripped across the battlefield, cutting through shields, through armor, through void, annihilating a Warhammer and half a Gemini squadron in a single instant. The storm faltered. The thunder broke. And Admiral River's voice cut across every channel iron hard. Hold your ground. Do not break. We face it now or there will be no tomorrow. The unmaking ship loomed, its weapons flaring again as the battle for Earth's skies hung on the edge of annihilation. The unmaking ship filled the void like a nightmare given form. Its surface rippled with resonance fire, its silhouette blotting out the stars, its core blazing brighter than a sun. Every sensor screamed, every officer stared in horror. This was what the Isabella II had seen at the cradle. This was the weapon meant to end everything. It fired again. The Aegis dome flared, scattering the beam, but the shield lattice shattered in half its ships. 2 Aegis vessels went dark, their cores bleeding fire as they fell into silence. The dome flickered, broke, and collapsed. Earth's defenses were suddenly bare. The bastions answered with thunder. Their storm cannons roared, arcs of lightning striking across the monster's surface, but its shields held. The resonance burned brighter, absorbing the storm as though feeding on it. River's voice was steady on the comms. "All units. We break it here. There is no retreat." The Razee 2 and Skuda V surged forward, halo nets blazing, every cannon hammering at the giant. Warhammers followed, their fire converging in perfect unison. Marines and Illyrians stood ready in transporter bays, particle beams humming as they prepared to board. "Send them," Rivers ordered. General Tudor and his Marines materialized inside the unmaking ship's corridors. Illyrians phased with them, crystalline weapons glowing. The halls were vast, pulsing with resonance energy, alive like veins of a beating heart. Shadows rose to meet them, constructs larger than tanks, their forms shifting with every strike. The battle inside was chaos. Marines fired point blank, grenades detonated, Illyrians cut with blades of light. Tudor roared orders, cutting a path toward the core. Every step forward cost lives. Every meter was bought in blood. Outside, Arclight, Tempest, and Zephyr moved as one. Arclight unleashed its storm cannons, lightning chaining through the unmaking ship's outer shields, tearing chunks from its flanks. Tempest expanded its anomaly, warping space around the monster, slowing its movements, bending its weapons off target. Zephyr phased directly into its shadow, striking again and again from places no watcher could anticipate. The Alliance fleets poured everything into the breach. Bastions hammered with stormfire, warhammers roared with plasma, orbital guns phased in and out, firing until their barrels glowed white. And still the unmaking ship endured. Inside its core chamber, Tudor's strike team finally reached the heart, a pulsing engine of resonance light, burning so bright it seared their eyes. Stephen's voice guided them through comms, relaying ancient codes from Sentinel's archives. "Target the stabilizers," he shouted. "If it collapses, the whole core goes with it." Charges were planted. Marines fought to hold the line as constructs swarmed in. Illyrians sang their harmonics, weaving resonance disruptions into the core itself. Tudor slammed his hand on the final charge. For the Shepherd. The detonation ripped through the heart of the unmaking ship. Outside, its shields shattered. Lightning from Arclight chained deep into the breach. Tempest's anomaly crushed its outer hull. Zephyr fired from 3 dimensions at once, tearing its spine apart. The bastions and warhammers unleashed everything, one last storm of fire and fury. The unmaking ship convulsed. Its core ruptured. And with a blinding flash, it exploded, a dying star tearing itself apart across the void. The shockwave hammered through the battlefield, scattering wreckage for light years. Alliance ships reeled, shields flared, but they held. When the light faded, the void was silent. The unmaking ship was gone. The battlefield was wreckage and silence. Warhammers burned, Aegis ships drifted crippled. A bastion lay broken but not dead. Marines who had boarded the monster never returned. Their sacrifice was written in the shattered husk that no longer darkened Earth's skies. But Earth still stood. Sentinel still burned with light. And the Alliance had endured the worst storm yet. In the council chamber, voices trembled not with fear but with awe. The Alliance had slain the weapon meant to end them. Stephen's words carried across the silence. This was not their end, only their test. The cradle still forges. But we have Ghost. We have storms. And now we have hope. Rivers stood, his gaze unflinching. The Watchers will come again. Stronger. But so will we. From the ashes of the Shepherd, we've risen. And when they come next, we'll be ready to finish this war. The chamber erupted in voices, not of despair but of resolve. Across the fleets, survivors saluted their fallen. Across the colonies, citizens looked upward with pride. For the first time in generations, the Alliance did not feel hunted. It felt dangerous. The stars beyond the rift burned darker. In the Watcher's cradle, the great lattice stirred, birthing weapons even vaster, hungrier. They had lost their unmaking ship, but their harvest was far from over. And somewhere deep in the void, more of the forgotten fleet slept, waiting to be found, waiting to rise. The war was not over, but its end had begun. Stay tuned and subscribe to follow along with Earth and Admiral Rivers as they battle the Watchers.